Audio Jungle. Ah ha ha ha!
Hey everybody, it's Dave with Blue Bears Games, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Blues Budget Battle Brews. This week we're actually doing an emergency video just because this deck is actually sold, but we are doing a mono green Landfall deck. So the reason why I'm doing it is because I sold it to a new viewer, so I want to welcome Ross into the Blue Bears Games family. He went ahead and purchased 12 of the decks. So that actually gives me a chance to kind of reiterate something that I need to go over again. So whenever one of these decks sells, which is always great, I have to attempt to remake the deck in case somebody else wants a version of it. So remember that even though the deck that I have listed isn't going to be an exact replica, sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. The deck will play exactly the same as the deck in the video, so you can kind of see that there are similarities to the cards that get replaced, and the strategies will be mostly the same. So I got that out of the way, so let me go ahead and tell you about this one. So this is mono green Landfall, like I said. The strategy here is to basically just use your land drops to get a better board state in some way, shape, or form. So to accomplish that, you're going to do it in a couple ways. You're going to be able to create tokens with the deck, make your creatures that already exist bigger, or swarm your opponent with the horde of everything that's on the board with all the benefits that you get from land drops. So I'll go over the deck, and then I'll go over a couple upgrades. Let me zoom out a little bit. Alright, so I start off with Snapping Gnarlid, because its landfall ability is when a land enters the battlefield under control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It's a 2 to cast 2/2 with an ability. That's always a great option when you get 2 to cast 2/2s. And he gets bigger. So the plan here is that you want to play him on turn 2, and then on your third turn you can play a land. He's a 3/3 when he attacks, so technically it's a 2 to cast 3/3 at least for one turn. So I got a play set of those in there. Territorial Scythe Cat is a 3 to cast 2/1 trampler with landfall, and the landfall ability is when a land enters the battlefield under control, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So unlike the Snapping Gnarlid, the Scythe Cat's buffs stay on it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get this out by turn 3, and then on 4th turn when you play land, your hope is to have both these out, and you can possibly, you know, he'll be a 3/2 by that time, and he'll end up being a 3/3, so he'll attack for 6. So you should have your opponent almost halfway down by the time 4th turn comes, if not sooner. So there are 4 of them in there. Migratory Greathorn. I've actually just realized how good this card is just based on a whole bunch of things. I started playing on Arena the other day, and I made a Landfall deck, blue-green, and him with a couple of other things makes Landfall just ridiculous. So he mutates, and if you don't know what mutate is, and I might have to explain that in depth, if you don't understand it, message me and I will explain it all. There are some things about it that can be confusing, but for the most part, you're going to mutate this guy onto one of your creatures. You can only mutate onto a non-human. I don't believe that there are any humans in this deck. You want to put him on top because he's probably going to have the biggest power toughness ratio of all the creatures you have. And when he enters the battlefield, if it was mutated, you search your library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So there's 2, 3, and 4 of them. Spore Mound, while it doesn't say Landfall on it, Spore Mound technically should say Landfall because his ability is a Landfall ability. So whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you create a 1/1 green Sapperling token. So that's the first part of maybe doing a horde or a token swarm style, and there are 2 of them in there. The second part of that is Rampaging Baylos. It's one of the first rares. It's got trample. It's a 6/6 for 6, so its stats are great right off the bat. It's a 6/6 trampler for 6. Yeah, that's a lot, but you should be able to make it to turn 6. His landfall ability is whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, create a 4/4 green beast creature token. Simple and great for adding to your horde. The next rare is Reef Hydra. It's a 6 to cast 5/5 trampler, so if you didn't notice, there's a small sub-theme of trampling in here. Its landfall ability is whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, but if the land was a forest, you do 2 instead. There are only 4 non-forests in here. There are literally 20 forests in this deck. So by the time you get him out, he should get really big really quickly. Moltani Yavamaya's Avatar. It's another 6 to cast, another Trampler. This one has reach to help you defend against flying if you need to. It starts off as a 0/0, but it gets +1/+1 for each land you control and each land card in your graveyard. So there are a couple of things that will put some lands into your graveyard here, and that will count towards his ability. You can also pay a green and 1 and then return 2 lands you control to the owner's hand, and there's a colon there, so you can do that multiple times. And you can return Moltani from your graveyard to your hand if for some reason he's dead. Beanstalk Giant is actually really one of those cards that has more use than you would think right off the bat. Sure, he's a 7 to cast, star, and the stars are equal to the number of lands you control. And his other ability is he's an adventure card. So his adventure is you can cast it for 3, search your library for a basic land, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And then what happens after that is you exile the card. It's still a card you can play as the Beanstalk Giant. So I got 2 of them in there. Adventurous Impulse. That was the creatures. We're now on to the non-creatures. Adventurous Impulse is 1 green. So most likely what you're going to hope for is the Adventurous Impulse is in your opening hand, so you can do it first turn, because I do not have a 1-drop. Because the 1-drop landfall creatures I was not happy with as far as what their abilities did, and I didn't think they had enough impact. So Adventurous Impulse says, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or a land from among them and put it into your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library. So it's almost akin, and most people don't recognize this, to what blue has is called a brainstorm. Whereas it lets you draw 3 cards and you take 2 and put them on top of your library in any order. This one lets you look at 3 cards, not draw, but look at 3 cards, and then you can take one that is either a land or a creature, put it in your hand, and then put the other 2 on the bottom of your library. It's not as good as a brainstorm, obviously, but it's kind of like an equivalent that green has, because remember, green's not really supposed to be able to draw cards like blue can. So play a set of those to hope to get at least one of them in your opening hand. Into the Unknown. You can play this on your first turn as well. It says actually, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You cannot, because you have to have a target creature. So unless your opponent has a creature in play on, like they go first, they have a 1-drop. The only thing you can do is be able to play it on your first turn is if they have something. You don't want to do that, but that's the only way you can do it. I forgot, Enter the Unknown has to target a creature. But when it targets a creature, it explores, and with Explore, what that means is you reveal the top card of your library. You put that card into your hand if it's a land. If it's not a land, you can put a +1/+1 counter on the creature, and then put the card either back on top or into your graveyard. And then the other abilities, you may play an additional land this turn. So it's to help you get an additional land drop for the landfall abilities in a turn. Explore, same thing. It helps you get an additional land drop, so you may play an additional land this turn, but it lets you draw a card. Green doesn't have a lot of card draw specifically. This is one of the better ones. Got a play set of those in there so you can play with that. And this is Triumph. It's a 2 green. It searches your library for up to 2 basic farce, and remember there's 20 of them in there, so you should be able to get it. You're not going to control this Planeswalker from this build, but if you put one in there, you can. It has the ability that you can search for 3 of them instead, and put them in your hand, so you can have additional land drops. Grow from the Ashes, another one that searches for land. It has a kicker, so it's 3 to cast and 2 for kicker, so 5 total if you kick it. You search your library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield tapped. I'm sorry, no, it's not tapped. Put it onto the battlefield, then you shuffle your library. If this spell was kicked, you instead search for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield. I didn't know Grow from the Ashes didn't come into play tapped. That's always nice. 2 of them in there. Retreat to Zandu helps you, I guess, it helps support the deck by helping it combo a little. And what I mean by that is the abilities that it has on this are landfall abilities that help you either stay alive or really help pump up your creatures. So whenever a land enters the battlefield, you can choose either one of these. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature so you can make your creatures bigger, or gain 2 life because you may need to, depending on the board and what your life total is at. Only choose this if you need to, the gain 2 life. You don't need to do it unless you're low on life, and you think that your opponent's going to kill you. I believe this is the last rare, the Mending of Dominaria. It's 5 to cast. It's a saga, so when it comes into play, you do the first thing. On your upkeep, and the next turn you do the second thing, and then after that, the next turn on the upkeep you do the third thing. So, the first 2 lure counters, you put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you may return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. That's important because you may flip over a bad creature, but in your graveyard is a good creature, and you want to get it back. Or it may be something where you don't have enough land yet, and you want to cast a creature. You may flip over some expensive stuff, but in your graveyard is a 1 or not a 1, a 2 to cast or a 3 to cast that you can cast, so you can get it back. The third part is where it comes in and makes Landfall really shine. The third lure counter says return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then shuffle your graveyard into your library. So what that essentially does is, if you have a bunch of land in your graveyard already, it creates a multitude of land drops for Landfall triggers. And then you get to get everything that went into your graveyard, even if it went into the graveyard from the Mending of Dominaria or from play. Say your opponent plays black and they destroyed a lot of your creatures, you get them back in your library so you can get them back again. Also, the spells that you've cast throughout the game, you get them back in as well. And that's all the cards in there. The next part is usually pretty simple, but there's a small twist here. This deck is the first time I'm ever going to put a play set of something like Evolving Wilds in there. I don't like doing that often because I don't have a lot to put in a lot of the decks that I have, but this deck really shines with these. Okay? So these, as you know, they come into play, so they count as a land drop. That's a landfall trigger, and then you can tap and sack them to go get another land. That's an additional landfall trigger. So that's why these are in here, and that's why there are 4 of them in here. That's why this deck has actually got more lands in it than most other decks, because you want as many lands to trigger landfalls as you can. So there's 4 Evolving Wilds and then 20 Forests. And that's the base deck for this. So that's the strategy for it, is to just beef up your creatures, get a board state, and just swarm your opponent, make your creatures bigger, or what have you. Some upgrade options, and I'm going to go over them hopefully quickly enough and then you understand it. So my first part that I would do if I wanted to upgrade this deck, I don't have a whole lot of the upgrade cards that I chose to put in the deck, and it also would bump the price of the deck up way beyond the $20 price range. But the land ramp side, I would swap in, if I had them, Rampaging Baylos, Nature's Lures, or 3 Visits, because they're a little cheaper to cast than the ones that are already in here. They'll help you get extra land drops for extra landfall triggers, and they're a little cheaper than the ones in there already. I'd also add 2 more Nissa's Triumphs for creatures. Okay, let me restart that. I'd add 2 more Nissa's Triumphs. Then I'd also add I don't know how to explain these creatures, but they are land drop adders is the best way I can put it. So I'll explain. Cards like Wayward Swordtooth, Azusa, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, their abilities say you may play an additional land each turn. I'd add a couple of them if you have them around. They're kind of pricey. I mean, I don't believe any of them are actually less than $20 at this point. So I'd add them if you have them. They kind of add to that land drop ability so that you can do more things. That's what the Nissa's Triumphs are for, because you want to keep putting lands into your hand from your library and being able to drop them, but the only way to be able to drop them is if you do something like Explore or have some of those creatures that add additional land drops to your turn. I'd also add an Ancient Green Warden to get the land fetching lands back for more landfall triggers. So when you read it, I'll have it up here on the screen. Ancient Green Warden, I believe, is the one that lets you play lands from your graveyard and put them into play, lets you play them. So I have the Evolving Wilds in there so that you can actually fetch a land, or play it, get a landfall drop, fetch a land, get another landfall drop, and with Ancient Green Warden, you can actually play the Evolving Wilds from your graveyard, get another landfall drop, and then go search for another land. So you can get up to 4, maybe even more, depending on how many. If you added some of those extra land drop creatures I just mentioned, you can get a whole bunch of landfall triggers in a single turn. So that's the next thing I would add. That, again, worth more than the deck that I'm selling itself. So if you have them, great, do that. Next, I would also add Ashaya and Scoot Swarm, and that's a must if you have them, It's literally, I mean, if you haven't seen what the Scoot Swarm Ashaya combo does on Arena and in Magic itself, it literally creates 1,000,000 tokens, specifically Scoot Swarms. So, if you don't know what that combo is, let me know. I will actually show you on my Arena. I will take a video of my Arena and show you what it does. And it literally just creates a multitude, and I mean almost unlimited Scoot Swarms. Lots of 1/1 tokens. Some of the enchants that I would add to help the deck are Zendikar's Royal. Zendikar's Royal, every time you play a land, it has a landfall ability. You create a 2/2 elemental. And then Cryptolith Rite. And Cryptolith Rite reads that your creatures can now tap to add 1 mana of any color. So it helps you ramp into things, be able to cast things with all those creatures, especially if you have the Ashaya and the Scoot Swarm combo in play. I would also add a Growing Rites of Itlomak. It helps you search for a creature, and then it flips when you have enough creatures in play, and turns into a Gaia's Cradle. It is the poor man's Gaia's Cradle, because it requires some things. It's still expensive, don't get me wrong, monetarily speaking, but it's not as expensive as a Gaia's Cradle, so that can help you out in this way, in this as well. You can also possibly add Overrun style spells. Overrun gives all your creatures +3/+3 and trample. There are a bunch of different ones for green. You maybe can add a Garruk Wildspeaker, who also has that ability. It creates tokens, and its ultimate ability is to basically Overrun, which is give all your creatures +3/+3 and trample. And lastly, we're going to go over lands. And normally this is a section where I tell you on a 2-color deck that you can go and get 2-color fixers. You don't need to do that here. This one's going to be a little different. I would add stuff like a Jungle Basin or a Gildas Commons. They are bounce lands, so that when they come into play, you have to bounce a land to your hand. You can play them and bounce themselves back to your hand, so you always get a landfall trigger. So those are that's a little trick that I would do if I were to, you know, run this deck. If you purchase it, that's what the directions that I would go in. That's what I've actually kind of been doing. I've been playing a deck like this on Arena, and that's what I've been doing with it, and it works very well. So anyway, those are a few suggestions, and you know, any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions that you have, you know, go ahead and let me know. Send me a message on Facebook. Send me an email. Ross, thank you for emailing me. I love hearing what you said, and you made me feel really good about what I do. So thank you for that. And you can also leave a comment on the bottom of this, in the comment section of this video. I want to make one more note. So if you do want to purchase this deck, and they're $20 a piece, and I have a couple ways I can do it. I can do $20 a piece, or if you buy more than one, I can do $15 plus each plus shipping, or they can be $20 a piece, no shipping, for more than one deck. So however you want to run it, we can do. I want to make the mention that on the Facebook page, when the ability to purchase the decks came up, and Ross tried to do that, for some reason the Facebook, I don't know, algorithm didn't allow the actual sale to go through. So I'm going to make the suggestion that you can go to the Facebook page to look at the decks I have available, but I would message me directly to do the purchases going forward until I figure out why it did what it did. I don't know, it said it was something suspicious. So maybe it was because he bought 10 decks, maybe it was because I had just set it all up and they were just not sure how to handle it. Whatever the case may be, I would like to get these decks into people's hands. Minus the 12 that were bought yesterday. I will have more versions of those decks, however, but it's going to take some time. To do that, just message me from the Facebook page and we'll go from there. So, any questions on that, again, just send me an email. I can answer anything you need to know. Other than that, that is my time for the week. I want to thank you again for watching. Please remember to do the following: like the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so, and I don't know why you wouldn't have. Share this out to somebody who may possibly be interested in this deck or any of the other decks that I have available. Other than that, please enjoy the rest of your week, stay safe, and I will see you all next week.